October 1941, the Russian front. A boundless expanse of mud, ice, snow, and despair stretches endlessly across the Russian landscape. A terrain so vast and unyielding that the horizon seems an illusion, a mirage in a land consumed by war. Every inch gained, every step taken, exacts a toll measured not in distance but in sweat, frostbite, blood, and bone. The first snows of the Russian winter fall like a slow, inexorable punishment, blanketing the ravaged earth in white, obscuring the tracks of armies that have carved the land with the fury of mechanized war. Tank treads churn rivers into mud, artillery wheels grind into frozen soil, and infantry columns sink knee-deep in icy quagmires that swallow men and horses alike. The Rasputitsa, that treacherous season of mud, dominates all. Roads vanish under the weight of boots and trucks. Bridges collapse under heavy convoys. Rivers become frozen traps where the unwary perish silently beneath the ice. The German blitzkrieg, a weapon of ruthless efficiency that had shattered Europe, comes face to face with a foe it cannot defeat. A landscape that is itself a merciless opponent. The campaign that promised victory by autumn now contends with attrition, not by bullets, but by exhaustion, frostbite, starvation, and the relentless cruelty of a land that tolerates no weakness. Every passing day, the wind howls with a voice that carries both prophecy and condemnation, cutting through layers of wool, fur, and canvas to pierce the flesh beneath. Soldiers see their breath crystallize into icy clouds. Their fingers and toes succumb to frostbite, and their rations shrink to meager portions barely enough to sustain life. Nightfall arrives quickly, bringing temperatures far below anything the Wehrmacht has ever endured. Lanterns illuminate frozen roads and mud-choked fields in a ghastly glow, revealing the faces of men stripped of hope, yet still driven by discipline, obedience, and fear of reprisal. The air is filled with the metallic tang of frozen blood and the stench of rotting horses, a grim testament to the cost of relentless advance. Snowdrifts cover the wreckage of vehicles and abandoned weapons, creating a silent cemetery of steel, mud, and ice. Even the sound of marching is muted, absorbed by the endless whiteness, making each step seem both futile and heroic. The Wehrmacht, mechanized, disciplined, and formidable, has advanced farther into the east than any army in recorded history. Columns of tanks, trucks, and infantry march relentlessly, cutting through forests, crossing rivers, and traversing frozen plains. They reach the outskirts of Moscow, their steel and firepower unmatched. Yet even this mighty army finds its advance slowed, its precision shattered, not by bullets alone, but by frost, mud, and mechanical failure. Lubricants thicken in sub-zero temperatures, engines seize, horses collapse from hunger and exhaustion, men shiver in sodden boots and frozen uniforms. Soldiers hardened by campaigns across Poland, France, and the Balkans face a new adversary. The Russian winter, a silent predator that strikes without strategy or mercy. Frozen rivers fracture under the weight of vehicles, swallowing tanks in their icy grasp. Entire infantry units are immobilized in mud pits, forced to abandon supplies and weapons to survive. Every march is a negotiation with death itself, and every victory won is paid in exhaustion, in frostbitten extremities, in despair. Across the same lines, the Red Army clings to existence. Supply chains groan under the weight of frost and snow. Reserves are exhausted, but spirit and courage remain unbroken. And as the Germans curse the cold, the mud, and their own limitations, a new force begins to stir. Not in trenches, but in factories, assembly lines, shipyards, and workshops far from the front. Here, engineers, labourers, and visionaries forge machines of steel and rubber, instruments of survival capable of bridging continents and transforming the tide of war. In Siberia and the Urals, factories rise from barren landscapes, assembling trucks, tanks, and artillery that will carry men, guns, and hope across thousands of kilometers of hostile terrain. Every bolt tightened, every engine tested, becomes an act of defiance against both geography and fate. The sheer scale of mobilization challenges imagination, proving that survival requires more than courage. It requires motion, ingenuity, and relentless labor. Winter intensifies, and Moscow braces under the shadow of the Wehrmacht, streets empty as civilians are evacuated, while city factories work around the clock, producing rifles, shells, uniforms, and trucks. Men and women alike labor, driven by patriotism, survival, and fear, their hands frozen, faces smeared with grease and soot. Every vehicle produced represents a promise, the promise of movement, of resilience, of life returning to the front lines. The mechanization of the Red Army is no longer optional, it is existential. Without it, divisions become immobile, cities fall, and the scale of sacrifice grows unbearable. Every truck, every spare part, every crate of ammunition embodies a fragile lifeline connecting factories to frozen forests, rivers, and plains where battle rages in blizzards and mud. Engineers and mechanics work in near darkness, their fingers raw and bleeding, improvising solutions with scraps of metal, wood, and ingenuity. The city hums with activity, a fragile heartbeat that refuses to stop despite the ever-present threat of artillery and aerial bombardment. Each completed vehicle carries not just men and supplies, but hope, a testament to human determination against overwhelming odds. Soldiers on the front know that each mile gained or lost is entwined with the ceaseless labor of those far behind, a network of sweat, steel, and courage spanning thousands of kilometers. Industrial ingenuity becomes as important as bravery, proving that war is fought not only with rifles, but with hands, minds, and wheels. By the end of 1941, the war has become not just a contest of courage or strategy, but of motion, logistics, and industrial output. The Red Army, though brimming with bravery, faces the stark reality that courage alone cannot move artillery, cannot supply men, cannot transport fuel or shells across the devastated expanse of Russia. Entire industries have been relocated east of the Ural Mountains, forced to rise anew in inhospitable landscapes. Factories are reborn in exile, yet production alone is insufficient. Roads, vehicles, and infrastructure must exist to carry the lifeblood of war across thousands of kilometers. The Gaz AA truck, humble and durable in moderation, exemplifies the limitations faced. Strong enough for minor operations, yet fragile under extreme winter conditions. Inadequate for the total mechanization necessary to sustain offensives. The Russian soldier fights with lion-like ferocity, yet without adequate transport, supply, or mechanical support. His courage is blunted, his valor a brittle weapon against modern war. Communication lines are tenuous. Radios fail in the cold, and horse-drawn wagons, once the backbone of logistics, collapse under snowdrifts and ice. The soldiers, carrying machine guns, artillery shells, or personal belongings, are forced to improvise, hauling loads on sleds, dragging guns across rivers that crack underfoot, and enduring hunger that gnaws at resolve. Every convoy lost, every broken axle or frozen engine, becomes a deadly setback in a campaign where time is both enemy and ally. The battlefield itself becomes a test of endurance, ingenuity, and determination beyond what bullets alone can measure. Across the Atlantic, in a nation untouched by bombs or invasion, a new industrial and logistical force awakens. America, vast, insulated, and technologically advanced, begins to arm not just itself but nations under siege. When President Franklin D. Roosevelt signs the Lend-Lease Act in March 1941, he does more than authorize aid. He unleashes motion, power, and survival across continents. Tanks, aircraft, artillery, and ammunition roll forth. Yet among these, one machine emerges as the linchpin of victory. The truck. This unassuming vehicle, humble yet vital, becomes the artery of movement, feeding soldiers, transporting fuel, hauling artillery, and ferrying infantry across frozen rivers, mud-choked roads, deserts, and mountains. Without it, the engines of war stall, armies starve, artillery freezes in place. Victory, it becomes clear, will depend as much on steel and wheels as on strategy and courage. Convoys stretch thousands of kilometers, facing enemy ambushes, frost and terrain that mocks human endeavor. Yet trucks endure where men and horses falter, bridging gaps that bullets and bravery alone cannot. The logistical miracle of Lend-Lease will, in years to come, define the survival of nations under the hammer of total war. Each truck becomes more than a vehicle. It becomes a symbol, a lifeline, a promise of motion in a frozen, immobile world. Two trucks, in particular, redefined Soviet mechanization: the GMC CCKW and the Studebaker US-6. The GMC CCKW, the Deuce and a Half, is the embodiment of pragmatic American engineering. Every component, every bolt, every joint is designed for speed of production, reliability, and durability. Its 270 cubic inch inline-six engine hums with a low, relentless growl, unassuming yet endlessly capable. Its frame is overbuilt, axles strong, and transfer case simple yet brilliant. The WWII can ford rivers, climb slopes that defy imagination, and haul loads far beyond its rated capacity without faltering. It does not boast, it endures, a ceaseless workhorse of mechanized warfare. Its cargo bed becomes the lifeline of entire regiments, carrying artillery shells, bread, winter clothing, medical supplies, and the personal effects of soldiers who cling to it as if it were a living entity. Every inch of the WWII is tested in Siberian cold, and it answers not with complaint, but with unwavering endurance. Its presence transforms the strategic possibilities on the Eastern Front, allowing commanders to plan operations that were impossible mere months before. Convoys stretch for kilometers, tires crunching over snow and ice, headlights dimmed to avoid enemy detection, as the trucks push forward through forests scarred by shelling, over plains riddled with craters and past villages burned to rubble. Each journey becomes a testament to engineering, courage, and survival intertwined in steel and motion. The Studebaker US-6, by contrast, is a marriage of brute strength and elegant engineering, longer, sturdier, and blessed with a Hercules 320 cubic inch engine. It produces torque capable of dragging artillery and supply wagons through swamps, forests, and mud that would halt lesser vehicles. Its cabin, compact yet robust, is designed for soldiers who spend nights beside it, tending fires beneath the engine to prevent freezing, sleeping against its frame under artillery fire or blizzards. To its operators, the US-6 becomes a living companion, a trusted partner capable of enduring alongside them. For the Soviet soldier, it transforms from mere machine to indispensable partner. The difference between survival and annihilation, between immobility and operational freedom. Its steel frame withstands shellfire, frost, and the crushing weight of supplies. Its tires, designed to traverse mud, ice, and snow, carry infantry, artillery, and ammunition across the most forbidding terrain, as if defying the very elements themselves. Drivers and mechanics grow attached to their vehicles. They swear by them, repair them tirelessly, and sometimes, in the dead of night, whisper their thanks for having survived yet another impossible march. Engineers tweak radiators, replace frozen fuel lines, and improvise heating systems to keep engines alive in temperatures that routinely reach 40 degrees below zero. The US-6 allows commanders to plan bold maneuvers, moving artillery and infantry rapidly to exploit gaps or respond to threats. It exemplifies how industrial innovation directly impacts survival and strategy. In mud, snow, and enemy fire, the truck becomes both lifeline and shield, a moving testament to human ingenuity against the harshest conditions. Every mile it covers is an act of defiance against winter, geography, and enemy fire alike. Convoys of trucks, stretching for miles across frozen plains and snow-choked forests, become the lifeblood of the Soviet war effort. Soldiers and drivers endure frostbite, hunger, and exhaustion, working tirelessly to keep the arteries of war open. Every delivery of shells, rations, or fuel carries a multiplier effect. It enables artillery barrages, resupplies frontline infantry, and sustains morale. In villages along the road, exhausted civilians watch the trucks pass, a sign that survival is still possible. Soldiers sleep beside their vehicles, keeping them warm with fires built under the chassis, improvising repairs with whatever scrap they can find. Mud, snow, and ice are constant antagonists, but the trucks press forward, stubborn as men themselves. Frontline commanders learn to respect them, plan around them, and protect them with the same care they give to human lives. A convoy's success or failure can determine whether a unit survives the winter or succumbs to the frozen emptiness of the Russian steppe. The integration of logistics, engineering, and human endurance proves vital, as even the smallest failure can cascade into disaster. Every night, headlights dim to avoid detection, yet the trucks continue, carrying hope into the frozen darkness. Drivers whisper encouragement to each other and to their machines alike, forming bonds that transcend the battlefield. Supplies arrive not only as materials, but as symbols of persistence. The rhythm of engines and the crunch of tires on ice create a heartbeat for an army on the edge of annihilation. The relationship between man and machine deepens in the crucible of war. Soldiers begin to see trucks as companions, not tools. Every engine start, every throttle adjustment, every careful inspection becomes a ritual, a bond forged in snow, mud, and fire. Some drivers carve initials into dashboards. Others leave small religious icons or personal trinkets tucked beneath seats. The vehicles carry not only supplies but memories, hope, and life itself. In letters home, soldiers write of their trucks with reverence, calling them faithful, reliable, and heroic. Mechanics become as important as riflemen, their hands caked in grease, their knowledge a weapon against both the elements and enemy sabotage. Even in moments of quiet between battles, the hum of a motor is comforting, a reminder that survival is possible, that movement continues, and that the wheels of war, literal and figurative, are still turning. Commanders recognize that the truck is as strategic as a gun or a tank, and orders flow to protect and prioritize convoy movement. Drivers learn to navigate by memory, by terrain, and by instinct, often risking ambushes, frost, and ice to complete missions. The truck becomes a lifeline for the injured, the starving, and the isolated, a moving bastion of survival in a frozen landscape. Soldiers whisper blessings or words of encouragement to their vehicles, understanding that failure is fatal. The bond between man and machine becomes a defining element of Eastern Front warfare, shaping not only tactics but morale and endurance. By late 1941, the Eastern Front is a crucible of endurance, strategy, and engineering. Soldiers, drivers, and mechanics alike recognize the truth. Survival and victory depend as much on these machines as on rifles, tanks, or artillery. Convoys deliver fuel, ammunition, and supplies across rivers, forests, and snowfields, bridging gaps between production and front lines. The GMC CCKW and Studebaker US-6 symbolize industrial power, international cooperation, and human ingenuity. Winter remains deadly, but with motion, armies can fight, survive, and recover. Commanders adapt to mechanization, learning to plan offensives based on convoy capabilities rather than static positions. The battlefield becomes an interplay of terrain, weather, logistics, and strategy, where frozen rivers, ice, and mud challenge both human and mechanical endurance. The Red Army gains flexibility, enabling counterattacks that would have been impossible earlier in the campaign. Drivers become heroes, mechanics the silent backbone, and trucks the essential conduit of life and war. Every convoy is a story of survival, a testament to human creativity and determination against overwhelming odds. Soldiers depend on wheels as much as rifles, and the machinery itself becomes legendary among units. The Deuce and a Half, GMC CCKW continues to define Soviet mechanization, embodying reliability under extreme conditions. Each truck moves tons of supplies across snow, ice, and mud, defying both nature and enemy interference. Drivers push beyond exhaustion, mechanics improvise repairs in freezing temperatures, and commanders adjust strategy around the capabilities of these machines. Its frame withstands punishment, its engine endures sub-zero temperatures, and its cargo bed carries hope, survival, and tactical advantage. Soldiers rely on it not only for supplies, but as a symbol of resilience. Each mile covered is a testament to endurance, engineering, and human ingenuity. Convoys grow in size and efficiency, carrying artillery, rations, fuel, and reinforcements, creating a logistical backbone that underpins every operation. Winter and geography no longer dictate the tempo of warfare entirely. Mobility provides leverage. Engines hum through the night, tires crunch frozen earth, and headlights illuminate paths through desolate terrain. The truck becomes a moving emblem of defiance, carrying men and materials across a hostile, unforgiving landscape. Soldiers learn to protect, repair, and cherish these machines, knowing that survival depends on them. Each delivery contributes to the rhythm of war, ensuring that strategy, courage, and industrial power align. The GMC CCKW proves that victory is as much about movement as it is about firepower. His Studebaker US-6, complementing the GMC, provides unmatched strength, enabling heavy artillery and critical supplies to reach the most remote and frozen sectors. Soldiers sleep beside its frame, engines heated to prevent freezing, and repair tools always on hand for emergencies. Drivers and mechanics develop intimate knowledge of their vehicles, anticipating failures before they occur, improvising solutions to maintain operational continuity. Its presence allows for sustained offensives, rapid repositioning of troops, and reliable supply chains even under extreme conditions. The steel frame, reinforced axles, and powerful engine make it capable of enduring punishment that would destroy lesser machines. Convoys of US-6 trucks become lifelines, linking factories in the Urals with front lines hundreds of kilometers away. Soldiers speak of these trucks with reverence, attributing survival and mission success to their endurance and reliability. Every journey strengthens the bond between man and machine, as drivers navigate through snow, mud, and enemy fire. Their wheels carry not just supplies but the spirit of resilience, hope, and determination. Operational planning increasingly revolves around truck capabilities, reshaping how commanders approach the front. The US-6 embodies the marriage of industrial engineering and human endurance, a partnership forged in ice, snow, and fire. Its contribution becomes central to the strategic revival of the Red Army, enabling movements that redefine the campaign's possibilities. Convoys and trucks, at this stage, are more than logistical tools. They are instruments of strategy, survival, and morale. The presence of reliable vehicles allows Soviet units to concentrate firepower, move artillery rapidly, and supply infantry in areas previously unreachable. Each convoy reinforces the network of survival and operational capacity, reducing isolation and ensuring continuity in combat operations. Soldiers and commanders alike recognize the decisive impact of mechanization on morale and effectiveness. Winter, though still dangerous, becomes negotiable, as mobility ensures that units can maneuver, resupply, and recover. Each engine started, every convoy organized, carries weight beyond its physical cargo. It embodies hope, resilience, and the ability to adapt in a seemingly hopeless environment. The interplay of logistics, strategy, and endurance emerges as the decisive factor in campaigns across the Eastern Front. Troops gain confidence in the reliability of their supply lines, and planners can execute complex operations with precision. The mechanized backbone, comprising deuce-and-a-half and US-6 trucks, becomes indispensable, shaping the very nature of warfare in Russia. The vastness of the Russian landscape, initially an ally to the defending forces, became a logistical nightmare for both sides, but particularly for the invaders. The sheer scale of the distances involved meant that every mile of advance stretched the German supply lines to the breaking point. The Wehrmacht's reliance on horse-drawn transport for the majority of its supply chain proved to be a fatal flaw. While the frontline fighting units were highly mechanized, the logistical tale was antiquated, a stark contrast to the modern, all-wheel drive trucks arriving on the Soviet side. The German Kraftfahrwesen motor transport system was simply not designed for the Russian infrastructure, or lack thereof. Hundreds of thousands of horses perished from overwork, starvation, and the relentless cold, their carcasses littering the roadside, a grim marker of the Blitzkrieg's failure. The fuel crisis, already a significant constraint for the German war machine, was exacerbated by the terrain. Fuel had to be hauled over impossible distances, often by the very horses that were collapsing from the strain. This logistical paralysis meant that even when German units achieved tactical victories, they lacked the mobility and sustained supply to exploit them, allowing the Red Army to regroup and counterattack. The failure to capture key rail hubs early in the campaign, coupled with the differing gauge of the Russian railway system, meant that the Wehrmacht was forced to rely on slow, arduous road transport, a reliance that the Rasputitsa and the winter brutally punished. The logistical war was a war of inches, and the German army, for all its tactical brilliance, was losing it decisively. In contrast, the Soviet Union's industrial relocation, a feat of staggering complexity and human will, began to pay dividends. The factories in the Urals and Siberia were not just producing tanks and planes, they were forging a new strategic reality. The arrival of Lend-Lease trucks was the final, critical piece of this puzzle. The sheer volume of these vehicles, over 400,000 trucks were eventually supplied, transformed the Red Army from a largely foot-mobile force into a highly mobile, mechanized army. This was not just a quantitative change, it was a qualitative one. The six-wheel drive systems of the GMC and Studebaker provided traction and reliability that the Soviet-produced Gaz-AA could not match, allowing the Red Army to move off the few paved roads and traverse the frozen steppe and muddy tracks with unprecedented speed. This newfound mobility allowed for the rapid deployment of reserves, the swift movement of Katyusha rocket launchers and anti-tank guns, and the maintenance of supply lines during the crucial counter-offensives around Moscow and Stalingrad. The trucks became the platform for the Soviet deep operation doctrine, enabling infantry to keep pace with armored spearheads, a capability that had been severely lacking in the early stages of the war. The ability to move, to concentrate force, and to supply that force across the vast hostile terrain was the single greatest factor in turning the tide of the logistical war. The American trucks, painted with the Red Star, were not just transport. They were the engines of Soviet operational art. The drivers of these trucks, often young men and women pressed into service, became the unsung heroes of the Eastern Front. Their lives were a constant blur of frozen roads, minimal sleep, and the ever-present threat of enemy air attack or partisan ambush. They learned to become master mechanics out of necessity, performing miracles of repair with limited tools in sub-zero temperatures. A common practice was to drain the engine oil every night and heat it over an open fire before pouring it back in for a cold start. A brutal, time-consuming ritual that was essential for survival. They developed a unique, almost spiritual bond with their vehicles, understanding the subtle groan of a failing axle or the stutter of a clogged fuel line. The trucks were modified on the fly. Extra planks of wood were often bolted to the sides to create higher walls for carrying more cargo, or makeshift heating systems were rigged up using exhaust pipes. The drivers navigated by the stars, by the faint tracks of the convoy ahead, and by an intimate knowledge of the treacherous landscape. The famous Road of Life across the frozen Lake Ladoga, supplying besieged Leningrad, was perhaps the ultimate testament to their courage and the reliability of their trucks. Under constant shelling and bombing, these drivers maintained the flow of supplies, their vehicles often breaking through the ice, only to be replaced by others who continued the relentless journey. Their endurance was not just physical, it was a profound act of psychological resilience, a daily defiance of the forces of nature and the enemy. The strategic implications of this logistical shift were profound. The German army, by 1942 and 1943, was fighting a war of attrition where every offensive was limited by the capacity of its supply chain. The Soviets, conversely, were building an operational reserve of mobility. The ability to rapidly shift entire armies and their supplies across the front allowed for surprise and concentration of force, two key ingredients for successful counteroffensives. The massive Soviet operations, Uranus, Mars, Bagration, were all fundamentally dependent on the reliable, all-weather, all-terrain capability provided by the Lend-Lease trucks. They were the invisible infrastructure that made the visible military victories possible. Without the thousands of tons of fuel, ammunition, and food delivered daily by these convoys, the Soviet tank armies would have ground to a halt, their guns silenced, their soldiers starved. The trucks did not win the battles on their own, but they ensured that the Red Army was always in a position to fight, to endure, and ultimately to prevail. The narrative of the Eastern Front is often dominated by the clash of armor and the heroism of the infantry, but the true enduring story is one of logistics, of the tireless, relentless motion of steel and rubber across an unforgiving land. The war against the Wehrmacht was won not just by the courage of the Soviet soldier, but by the American-made wheels that carried him to the fight. The final, crushing blow to the German war machine was delivered by an army that had learned to master the geography and the elements, an army that had transformed its logistical backbone from a weakness into an unassailable strength, powered by the continuous grinding motion of its global supply line. The echo of the GMC and Studebaker engines became the sound of ultimate victory. The psychological impact of the logistical failure on the German side was devastating. The initial confidence of the Blitzkrieg, the belief in the superiority of their equipment and doctrine, was slowly eroded by the sight of their own vehicles failing, their engines freezing, and their supplies dwindling. The German soldier, accustomed to rapid, decisive victories in the West, found himself mired in a war of endless, frozen suffering. The official German doctrine had failed to account for the sheer scale of the Soviet Union and the severity of its climate, leading to a catastrophic lack of winter clothing, proper lubricants, and all-terrain vehicles. This failure of planning was a moral defeat as much as a logistical one. The sight of well-equipped Soviet soldiers arriving in sturdy, warm cabins of American trucks contrasted sharply with the image of the frozen, exhausted Wehrmacht soldier shivering in a thin uniform, often reduced to scavenging for food and fuel. This disparity in logistical capability became a powerful propaganda tool for the Soviets and a source of deep demoralization for the Germans. The general winter narrative, while partially true, served to mask the more fundamental failure of the German High Command to prepare for the realities of the Eastern Campaign. The truth was that the German army was defeated, not just by the cold, but by the inability of its logistical system to function in the cold, an inability that the Red Army, thanks in large part to the Lend-Lease trucks, was able to overcome. The cold was a factor, but the motion was the answer, and only one side had the wheels to sustain it. The long-term impact on Soviet infrastructure and industry was equally profound. The wartime necessity of building new factories and developing robust logistical networks laid the groundwork for the Soviet Union's post-war industrial expansion. The experience gained by Soviet engineers and mechanics in maintaining and adapting the foreign-made trucks proved invaluable. They learned about all-wheel drive systems, robust chassis design, and the importance of standardization, lessons that would inform the design of future Soviet military and civilian vehicles. The Lend-Lease program was, in effect, a massive, accelerated transfer of automotive technology that the Soviet Union desperately needed. Furthermore, the construction of new roads and the improvement of existing ones, driven by the need to support the massive convoys, permanently altered the transportation landscape of the Western Soviet Union. The war, in this sense, forced a modernization of the Soviet transport system that might have taken decades to achieve in peacetime. The trucks, therefore, were not just temporary tools of war. They were catalysts for long-term industrial and infrastructural change. They were the physical manifestation of a global alliance, a testament to the fact that victory in a total war requires a total effort, spanning continents and combining the industrial might of one nation with the human endurance and strategic will of another. The legacy of the Deuce-and-a-Half and the Studebaker US-6 is not just in the battles they helped win, but in the modern, mechanized world they helped to create. The final resounding truth of the Eastern Front is that the wheels of industry, when combined with the will to endure, are more powerful than any weapon. The constant, relentless movement of those convoys, a ribbon of steel and hope across the frozen emptiness, was the true rhythm of victory.